Like you, before to run. Yeah. And you're living really rude. You know what I mean? Right? Right? No.
Okay, you did that, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah,
But let's look at what the person actually said and not.
exactly, exactly. Isn't that kind of pointless? That's so like, there's no just kidding.
Hi, folks. Woo, welcome. Welcome to True Story. We did it. What's happening? Thank you, friends and family who are no friends. We are live streaming right now, and live in the space. This is True Story. It is a program I've worked with since where we tell stories on the first Sunday of every month. This one's different. There are several writers who are working on longer form storytelling of memoir and books. I'll just call them books. And and we normally we're on Sundays, the first Sunday of the month. Next weekend, there's going to be a special True Story on Veterans Day, on Saturday at 8 p.m. And we have two different veterans groups who are coming to tell us their stories, their theme is As You Were. And they are both the deadly writer of wellness groups in Glendale, and they've been working with us since 2017, actually. And then the Warrior Bards from USC. It's actually an extension of the classics department at USC. And we had been exploring Greek plays with them, and now they are writing their own stories. So next Saturday will be really special. We'd love if you can join here at the theater or watch from home. It will be live streamed also. All of our programming is by donation. So if you can, for those at home or anyone here, if you can afford to give in support of this program, it would be greatly appreciated. The thing is with storytelling, once you tell your story, it no longer belongs to you, it belongs to others. And it reminds us that we are all a community of people, and we gotta support each other. It's simple. Do something you can. Tonight we have, this is the order we're going to be in, just myself, then Hutch Foster, then Will McFadden. Then we have a special guest appearance on video with Nick Ullett, all the way from Laurel Canyon. And then we will have Tom Stringer, and then Andrew Ullett. Raphael's one of our storytellers right here in the front row. Hello, Raphael. He's awesome. So tonight's theme is family business. This can mean different things to different people. For me, I grew up in a family business, so it means something very specific to me in more ways than one. Ours was a family business that was started in Central Falls, Rhode Island, about 40 years before my brothers and I were born. Central Falls was then the home of knitting mills and other working-class immigrants who had all come and had their own family trades and their own family businesses. Like many immigrants of that generation, my grandfather, Philip H. Ross, and my grandmother, Fanny, had as many children as her body would allow in order to stay in place. Everybody worked all 4 rounds and on by marriage, and every kid that came out. This is a true story. My parents had scheduled our births, so my dad would be available to be there. So all my brothers were born in early spring, which was the slow season. And I was scheduled to be born a New Year's baby during inventory. Isn't that so much for spontaneity? Although my aunties all worked at the store at one time or another, it was, of course, to be left to the men of the family. And so Philip's Garden Store became Philip H. Ross & Sons Wholesale Dry Goods. These strong women that you see here, these are the women I come from. And tonight I just want to tell a little story about my Auntie Ruthie. She's circled there. Another aspect of family business had to do with the neighborhood we grew up in, or in the whole city, or in the whole state of Rhode Island, in fact, if I'm being honest. At the time of this story, late 40s and early 50s, the area was always associated with one mafia family or another. And one day my cousin Arnold came home from school crying, and my Auntie Ruthie asked what had happened, and Arnold said, "Ray punched me in the stomach." This was Ray Jr., who lived a few doors away. He was the son of Ray Sr., who was the biggest mob boss in New England at the time. My cousin Arnold was totally nerdy, incredibly bright, and from what we've been told, he made a point of letting everyone know it. So I'm sure he got punched in the stomach a lot by all the bullies. But my aunt wasn't going to have her kid give her kid away to a lifetime of being punched. So she grabbed his hand and walked a few doors down to Mrs. Ray Sr.'s house. When she came to the door, my aunt said, "My son says your son punched you in the stomach. What are you going to do about it?" Mrs. Ray Sr. called her son to the door and asked if he had punched my cousin. He said, "Yeah." And then Mrs. Ray Sr. stepped behind him, held his arms back, and said, "Go ahead, Arnold, punch him." And he did. And it's really shook hands, thanked each other, and went their separate ways. I've heard this story several times, mostly written about my dad, with him saying that my auntie was too stupid to know who she was dealing with, and it could have gone very badly. She was just lucky that time. But no, I don't buy that. My Auntie Ruthie was a sharp woman who understood family business perfectly well and solved the problem herself. We've been told that Ray bothered my cousin again, and nobody ever bothered Ruthie. Just a little family. And speaking of friends who become family, no one is more family to me than Hutchins' sister.
Oh.
Except maybe the rest of his family.
Hey everyone. So this is from the book To Be, and I've entitled this chapter Autopsy of a Wedding. And we'll see how that goes. This is, because the chapter is quite long, this is just the beginning part of Autopsy of a Wedding. When anyone brought up Elsie Von Epp in polite conversation, I was reminded of the Third Reich. She ran her business with the same discipline as a stormtrooper, insisting her demands be met with exactitude by following an arcane, by-the-book cluster of customs and regulations set in stones by generations before her. She was a wedding planner. Highly sought after by the Hillsborough, California elite, she orchestrated the events regarding both my brother's and sister's weddings. Her knowledge of etiquette and matrimony minutiae was unparalleled. I had barely any interaction with her during my sister's nuptials, but for my brother's I was the best man, and if her chosen profession had taught Elsie Von Epp anything, it was not to trust the best men. Consequently, she was on me like Aquanet on a hairdo. Little did she know, she needn't have worried. It wasn't in my nature to give the bride's cousin a proper rogering in the cloakroom. Elsie Von Epp, wearing a headset, all dressed in black, supposedly not to call attention to herself, was so distrustful of me, she insisted I stand next to her just before the first dance. Until that moment, I had not been privy to the time-honored tradition of the wedding reception dance order, which was bizarrely sacred and not to be fucked with. The first dance belonged to the bride and groom, as one would anticipate. For the second dance, Todd and Patricia would split from each other, Todd then dancing with the mother of the groom, Patricia, the father of the bride. A few other select couples would also be allowed on the dance floor at this point, including me as best man, with and only with the matron of honor, who I better keep my hands off of. For the third dance, things got sticky. Patricia's father and mother, Ted and Mary Louise, were to dance together, and for equilibrium's sake, Mom should have danced with Dad. Mom and Dad, however, had divorced by this point, something Elsie Vonette took as a personal affront, the one slick turd on her clipboard of perfection. Under her breath, she kept muttering, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? I tried making light of the situation. I can't imagine there's someone secretly taking notes that protocol isn't being followed at the Foster Rare wedding. Elsie Vonette looked at me with disdain and spat out, oh, isn't there? It became clear using sarcasm to dissipate her anxiety was not wise. And it's the Rare Foster wedding, she corrected my rote. The bride's name always goes first. Then the wedding planner returned her focus to her more pressing problem. For the third dance, she sounded out. Your father will have to partner up with, what's her name again? I was pretty sure Elsie Vonette knew my stepmother's name and was making some dig at my parents' expense, but I played along. Deanna, I responded. That's right, Dick and Deanna will pair up, which leaves your mother abandoned for the third dance. So, what about Phil, I suggested. Phil was my mother's beau at the time, and her +1 for the wedding. He was suave, light on his feet, and would make a lovely addition to the dance floor, and for the person taking detailed notes from behind the potted typist. Boyfriends are not top-tier guests, Elsie Vonette had been moved. I tried again. Maybe Mom doesn't do the third dance. Elsie Vonette snapped at me as if I was a toddler shoving a Cheerio up my nose. She is the mother of the groom. Don't be opaque. I opened my mouth to make another suggestion, but the overly taxed wedding planner shut me up with an arched eyebrow and an off-putting clicking sound she made with her tongue. She mumbled a couple more unintelligible gripes to herself until she formulated her brilliant solution. You can dance with your mother. This was the suggestion, my third suggestion I was about to make, but I didn't want to take the wind out of her sails, so pretending I hadn't thought of it myself, I said, what a great idea. I was quizzed 3 times about whether I truly understand my dance duties. First dance, just watch. Second dance, matron of honor. Third dance, my abandoned mother. Fourth dance, choose from the aunties, the dowagers, the old biddies, who seem to have no one else in the world, and make their day. When she was satisfied that I wouldn't fuck anything up, I was dismissed by Elsie Vonette until the best man's speech, when I was inundated anew with blown out of proportion concerns, all for the sake of minding persnickety P's and Q's. My fiancé, Michael, was cast in a live industrial for McDonald's, which was basically a tech-heavy musical and sketch review for all the McDonald's managers throughout the company. The work was minimal and the pay was huge. He flew out to Los Angeles for rehearsals, and once he got his bearings, he called with tremendous excitement. I could live here. We had been circling the topic of possibly leaving New York and pursuing a California lifestyle. At that point, I had lived on the East Coast for 12 years, and moving back west to the state in which I was raised was appealing. But could I really leave New York's splendor behind? That subway door slammed shut when I paid a visit to my neighborhood bank branch in Brooklyn. While standing in line, I asked a police officer who was in front of me if I could borrow his pen. While never making eye contact, he thrust the requested item in my general direction and grunted as if I demanded his kidneys. His blatant contempt, entirely out of proportion to the situation at hand, was my final straw. It was sadly time to say arrivederci to New York. While I endorsed the check, filled out the bank slip, and returned the officer his ballpoint, hoping to effect I don't give a fuck if you just treated me like an asshole stance, Michael was in Los Angeles on a break from rehearsals and shopping for houses on a lark. Sometime in the late afternoon, the New York home line rang, and even before I answered, my body stiffened as if I were facing a roller coaster death drop. Sure enough, Michael was on the other end, practically giddy with enthusiasm. What? I inquired tentatively, to which he teased, I found our house. Do you trust me? Once Louise was put into motion, it was surprisingly how easy everything fell into place. It was a away party, an agreeable sale to my different co-op, a cross-country drive with our husky Travis in the back, and a Los Angeles home to move into on a quirky cul-de-sac street. Once in Los Angeles, not the California I was raised in, but familiar with the same, I felt like we could spread our wings for whatever was next. There was space, light, so many fruit trees. Our little parcel alone had an avocado, a pomegranate, and a dwarf lime, which we deduced after a couple of years of careful tending was a lemon. And then once we uprooted it and moved it from the shape of the pomegranate to the opposite side of the yard, we finally figured out it was actually a full-size fridge. We arrived at the cul-de-sac on Michael's birthday, the day before the moving van put in an appearance with all of our worldly possessions. And that night, we got to bed. No television, only an excited husky and the sound of fruit trees blowing in the wind, which being the third week of November. I refuse to call it civil union, and it most certainly will not be a domestic partnership. The two of us were sitting with Pastor Paul in his austere, leaning towards depressing office behind the church. My defenses were kicking in, and I could hear peevishness creeping into my voice. I wasn't sure if my request was really an issue, but I was taking a stand as if it was. Michael and I are getting married, and the ceremony will be called a wedding. The government can pat itself on the back by offering domestic partnership and civil union as solutions for gay marriage. But those designations made me feel like Charlie Brown on Halloween. The straight people receiving a mouth-watering piece of candy, but all I got simply because I was so dry. I thought of the saleswoman at Macy's who loosely inquired about the gift registry for our future wedding, which speaks volumes to who Michael and I were as a couple, that our first foray, our first toe dipping into whether there was a foundation in place for us to get married and be accepted as a married couple, occurred at local retail even before we found the site for the actual ceremony. The Macy's employee was an attentive audience and had listened to Michael and I blab on and on about our shared dream, our philosophy, which opened up her mouth like she had something to say, then stopped herself short as if she thought better. Nothing, she responded. It was quite evident she needed to share. We had two choices. Either ignore her querying expression and without relay the need, or address her concern. Michael made the call. You just what? He posed. I just don't know why you guys have to be married at all. Just go with calling it a domestic partnership. It's a fascinating thing to behold. What Michael is about to lash out. Everything goes into slow motion, and his expression shifts from open bon appetit to a fulsome incredulity, which, I have a suspicion, if left unattended, could trigger a nuclear chain reaction. What you say, bitch, might very well have been the next thing he would have said. But I pulled him away from that encounter, knowing full well we would not use Macy's for our registry. I personally saw it as a minor miracle that I got Michael out of the store without him purposely knocking over the coats of Otis. May 5th is available, Pastor Paul offered, snapping me back in the moment. You could do a 5 p.m. service on the church is lit beautifully back in the day. We were on a reconnaissance mission, that's what we told ourselves, nothing more. Going into the meeting, we weren't even 100% certain the church would agree to marry us, even though Pastor Paul was and had a long-time boyfriend. Those first steps are huge. And Michael and I were forging new trails or planting a rainbow flag on the moon. We weren't sure who would be welcoming and might slam the door. I can't tell you how astonished I felt, what a total relief it was in those slightly uncomfortable straight back chairs after fumbling our way through pleading our case to Pastor Paul that not only did we get the nod, but quite unintentionally, we secured things. Death. A spring wedding, symbolizing growth, a fresh start, the 5th day of the 5th month at 5 o'clock. 5. Certainly that represents something good, right? And even if it doesn't, it's on Cinco de Mayo, so who forget? I like it. What do you think? I asked Michael. He gave me a big Michael Shepard smile and said, anything that comes with tequila shots, I'm in. Okay, that's it then, I clarified. Maybe then at 5 o'clock, we can marry. It was a heady thing to say out loud. I reached out and touched the tips of Michael's fingers. We were blazed ahead. Pastor Paul had one more. We could call it a wedding. Absolutely, we can. In the eyes of the church, be married, but the government will not recognize your marriage as legal, and the certificate you'll eventually receive will reflect that. As I expected, an illegal marriage. After setting the date, other wedding components fell into place without too much fanfare. The invitation, the venue, the flowers, the wardrobe, the photographer, the kick-ass 6-piece band, some of it extravagant, some of it strictly budgeted. There was a freedom digging in, getting messy, and making joint decisions with minimal fuss. I thought of my siblings' weddings, the hours of planning, the hair pulling, the table charts. Who are we going to see next? Oh, Bob. The rules, all those fussy rules which were not followed to the letter, you don't cease to see criticism. You believe that groups or mourning for the first I was an unobserved fly on the wall when I heard my neighbor Sally whisper this to a doyen of the San Francisco Bay Area, probably my cousin Mark. The service perfectly lovely, but the two ladies sipping a chilled buttery vintage on the settee shook their heads and marveled openly at the egregious faux pas. How did my mother know? A middle-class girl from Toledo, Ohio, the proper time to wear a morning coat? Is there a And if a morning coat is supposed to be worn in the evening, why in the name of Liberace call it a morning coat? I am a rule adhering creature by nature, and I was very much intrigued by the social graces that shaped the society in which I was raised. But the Lux part that desired that level of meticulousness was overruled by the lax part that just authored by burdensome Emily. The world of Sally Foster, Elsie Bonnet, all manner of Hillsborough's creme de la creme today. Once you got beyond over-the-top punctiliousness to fit and honor engaged couples with nuptial showers, country club brunches, and all that other stuff. My sister Julie and her fiancé Rob, because of their Peace Corps work in Morocco, were thrown a Casablanca themed soiree. I wore this white dinner jacket, making me look like a background player on Rick's Cafes that I wasn't sure if Michael and I would be the honored guests of such a shindig, but I had hoped. Yes, I was marrying a man, and that's less of a reality. Pamphlet of effective manners, and also mentions an excuse of anecdotes. But my childhood heart simply wanted the same louding that was offered my siblings. I was the oldest, a junior to boot. Certainly that might not be the most fastidious to overlook the fact that who would be wearing a dress on the altar. Although if asked, I'm sure Michael would have obliged. So, twiddling my thumbs, I waited for an answer, a family friend to reach out and offer to celebrate us, wanting to believe that my people would come through. There was an engagement party, a betrothal tea, a sissy chatter. Our dance card was empty, and I was devastated that those accolades were not to be bestowed on Michael and me. Invention. I do give props to Sally and my siblings who RSVP'd to our wedding in the positive. The majority of the Hillsborough crowd did not grace us with their presence. That same pamphlet must have told them that it would be cheap, however, they did send the most expensive gifts on our register, leaving the salad spinner and the cat builder for our more financially challenged friends. Each rejection may have been another rock for the trick-or-treat bag, but once that bag was full, Michael and I had the freedom to define what we wanted our illegal marriage to be without Michael anticipating from the shadows. For instance, the suit Michael had constructed for our pre-6 p.m. wedding consisted of a matrix floor-length jacket much longer than any morning coat. We also were pressured to invite anyone we felt didn't belong, no distant relatives, no fly-by-night boyfriends, and certainly no racist homophobic Uncle Bob with his third or fourth wife. We proudly put our stamp on our wedding, and even though the Hillsborough tongues most likely wagged, the bottom of our invite boldly proclaimed a Foster Shepherd production.
And now, welcome to the stage, True Story stage for the first time. Will McFadden. Mr. First.
I told this story before in life.
Oh,
It's happened before, but not here.
well, welcome. Welcome to the world of storytelling.
My last summer at home in DC before I leave for college. So when Andrew Dinsmore calls the house and he tells me that all the cool kids are going to I don't hesitate. Dude, I'm in. I'm so there. I can't wait. When I hang up the phone, something feels off. Like, what am I missing? Oh, right. I have that summer job doing roof construction every Monday through Friday all day long. Well, I guess I'll just put that day. It just won't go. I'll take a day off. That's the thing. People do that. I've heard that. Yeah. I have worked my ass off all summer. A lot of my friends, they don't even have a summer job. I've missed everything. But I have not missed this. My last chance. And hey, Andrew said all the cool kids are going, so my hands are tied. The event is not going to help me. Still, as firm a decision as I just made, there was something gnawing away at me, and I wondered if it had anything to do with that. I had gone from a job because he knew the CEO to an actual member of the crew. A crew that dealt in piles of slate and bins of tar and worked a little bit closer to the sun in DC in July. Where if you go outside for 5 minutes, you're going to need an hour, even if you're not in pants and work doing manual labor on the roof. Could it be that as much as I hated the job, I secretly actually took pride in seeing the tangible results of what we as a team could accomplish every day together? This will be fine. It's a day, you know? Just now just confronting the reality that my parents would find out. They might be disappointed. And hey, I can live with their disappointment. I've had 18 years of practice. It was about if they had any say in the matter, and it seemed to me that they didn't, because I'm grown up now, my own grown-up job. Have you seen some of the guys I work with? Roger, Bill and Chris, Freddie? I mean, these are men. So I was not a man. I'm not going to fake going to work and take my hard hat and lunch bucket to King's Dominion. Why should I have to fake anything? Hey, so Mom, I'm going to King's Dominion on Friday with Andrew, a bunch of friends from school. Oh, great. Wait, Friday? What about work? Oh, yeah, I'm just taking the day off. Yeah, let him know ahead of time. It's no big deal. Huh. Okay, well, how your father is going to feel about that. He can feel whatever he wants to feel about it. It is my job. I can do what I want. I'm a grown man. Not grown. My dad knocks on the door to my room. Time to get up, buddy. You're late for work. Hey, Dad, I'm not going today. Thanks anyway. He tries to come in. I lock the door. William, open this door. I'm not going. Let me sleep. The next time, the pause after my name is a little longer. William, open this door. So I open the door. And I tell him now, I'm not going. And there's nothing he can do about it. You know, he's in his suit, and he tells me to say I've already missed my ride. My father is a gentleman, and he is a gentle man, but it becomes clear that me getting dressed is happening the easy way or the hard way. And the hard way involves my dad putting pants on me. He doesn't need to say anything. He just stands close to me and doesn't move until I move. I'm now 6'3". My dad is 6'4". I can feel my face getting red, and I've never been more angry at my dad. In the car, my arms are folded all the way there. My heart is on my lap. Neither of us says a word. We pull up. My dad puts his hand out for a handshake. But I get out of the car, slam the door in his face. When we take our lunch break that day, I notice Chris sitting together, laughing. Phil and Chris are a Sun team and compete together every day from Pennsylvania. I thought about my dad and how we'll never be at work together, laughing shoulder to shoulder about our own inside joke. Because I will never do what he does. I will never have a secretary and work on bipartisan commissions and represent my industry and go to work at the White House. And it's not so much that I will never, it's that I could never. When report cards became a thing in my life, I stopped being just a kid and I was something else. I was now this fascinating problem, riddle that no one could solve. An enigma that seemed to frustrate and confound everyone. He seems so smart and happy, and everybody likes him. He tries. He does the best work in the class, but he doesn't try. He doesn't care, and he doesn't focus. He's disorganized, and he doesn't study. And what is going on? I was diagnosed with ADD, charts, ADD, and depression, which was a symptom of the ADD, or is it the other way around? Is this the wrong medication? I got all the help my parents could find, but nothing worked. I still felt like maybe it is just that I'm lazy, and I'm not a fighter. My dad fights. He battles, he grinds, he fails until he succeeds. He's never considered himself talented or especially intelligent. He just outworks. He lives by the motto, work hard. That's it, that's the motto. My mom is the natural. She's the smartest person I know. But my dad's pulling an all-nighter to get the best grade on the book report. My mom had hers done 2 weeks early, and she already read 3 books before she had to turn it in. But they both got A's. All roads led to overachievement. I got C's with the occasional act of brilliance thrown in to remind everybody that I am capable. This underachiever, sometimes felt like an alien who speaks a different language. Sometimes I never doubted my parents loved me, but I did think that they didn't want me to be the way I am. And my biggest fear, my darkest secret, I didn't think that I could be fixed. They moved up to home in DC a couple years ago. I found a file of old report cards that they had saved. They confirmed everything I remembered. I was a train wreck. But on a lot of my reports listing all of my negative effort, the teacher would write something at the end. And these are quotes. Will is a sensitive, concerned young man who has a profound and positive influence on those around him, whether he is aware of this or not. Concern. I like that. I am concerned. That track. Another one said, after talking about all the academics, nonetheless, he remains one of the most genuinely kind, sensitive boys in the class, and for that, he receives my highest praise. It seemed like they were saying more than this. At least he's not. And I never noticed any of these parts of the report cards when I was a kid. I thought they were just being nice. All this kind of fact, looking at what I've done with my life in school, finding a way to connect across differences. And I thought every connection I made was across a big difference because whenever I connected, they weren't broken. Like me. Then I found an award. It was the Citizenship Award. And at the time, I thought it was a pity award. But it kind of went with all the other comments. I see him frequently lending a helping hand to others and often making an effort to include all who wish to be with him. But I recognize that guy. I like that guy. But I hated that guy for so long. I was judging him against the values of his environment, as opposed to the values that are actually most important to me. And really, they're the same values my parents hold in the highest regard to. They just live by and accomplish the values by they've been. So maybe I was theirs. I was never more angry at my dad than that day he drove me to work or physically intimidated me to work. But he was trying to actively show me, give me the values that he lives by that got him to where he was. Showing up was non-negotiable. Looking back, I never felt more loved. I remember when I first heard that saying that 90% of success in life is showing up. I thought, hey, wait a minute, I might just have a shot at this thing. I can do that. I can be at a place. I'm going to play this out. And it didn't happen until I was actually a grown man, reading my old report cards. But it finally occurred to me that maybe the important stuff, I had it right all along. And showing up as me is more than enough.
Well done. So Dick Olive wanted so badly to do this because he supported his story, and I'm just going to get out of the way. and we're gonna go play, and it's gonna be on that wall.
About maybe 12 years ago, I got an email from a guy called Matthew Blackett. He was a recent graduate from Cambridge University, and he Googled me because his grandfather thought that he'd been friends with my father. In fact, his grandfather, Ray, said that my father paid for his wedding. Now, I'd never heard of any Blacketts, but was intrigued and wrote back to ask how we were connected. Through your paternal grandmother, he replied. She was Emily Blackett. With this news, he also included a photograph of his grandfather's wedding to see if I could identify my father. And it was clearly a working class wedding from the 1940s, maybe late 30s. No wedding dress or formal marriage site, just men in their best suits and women in dresses and heavy coats. And the newly married couple looked young and happy, and sure enough, there was my father in the back row. So about 3 people from the bride on the bride's left, and peeping her head around the bride's left shoulder, my mother. I wrote back and confirmed that they were indeed there. A month later, Matthew wrote to ask if his grandfather could phone me, just for a chat, he said. I replied that it would be difficult to coordinate with the time changes, but that I'd be coming to England in the spring, and here was my phone number in Norfolk. I'd let him know I'd be there. Now, after my mother's death, she left me a little red brick bungalow in a village called Brancaster Stade. It's in Norfolk on the east coast of England. It's where my parents retired, and since my mother died, I have been promising to have some work done on the kitchen, not just the kitchen, I mean the house. Knock down some walls, put in a decent kitchen, a bathroom that isn't avocado green. But somehow I never got around to it, and then I don't know, 12, 14 years ago I was ready. And at the beginning of March, I arrived there to clear out all the china and glassware and everything that the workmen smashed when they got to work. And before the States, I wrote to Matthew Blackett and told him I was arriving. I spent most of my time there at the beginning, wrapping china and glasses in newspaper, putting them in boxes for storage in garden sheds. And then I started taking the art down off the walls. And, there were all these, they were lovely pictures, some of them, but they all look so 1950s. They all needed to be reframed. Anyhow, I get down everything off the wall. And one of the photos I took down was of my grandmother, my father's mother. She was an invalid. This is how everyone described her. My mother said that she'd never known her as an invalid. My sole visual memory of her, and I did quite a lot, was a tiny, frail woman dressed in very proper, almost Victorian clothes, sitting to the left of a coal fire in her very small front living. And the fire was always burning, even in the summer, and her skin was so thick and thin that as a boy I would angle myself so I could see the firelight dancing through her hair when she reached out to warm the fire. And she had 4-length, high-necked, grey dresses with sleeves that came to her wrists. She was pleasant and with a smile. As a small boy, she was severe, trim, and impenetrable. I took one last look at her in the ornate braced brass frame, and away she went into the closet. And it had been 4 long days, so that night I treated myself to a pub dinner. And the next morning, I started clearing out the kitchen cupboards. And around 2 in the afternoon, I decided on a nap. And no sooner had I put my head down, the phone rang. "Is this Nick?" An old man's voice asked. "This is Ray." My mind was blank. "Ray?" I said tentatively. "Ray Blackett." It all came back, and I started chatting to him. He told me that he'd grown up in London and was at the few streets from my grandparents in Tottenham. And when he was a lad, he used to do the shopping for them on Saturday mornings to earn a bit of pocket money. But we reminisced about the tiny house in which they lived. I mean, there was no heating, just a big black coal stove in the kitchen on which they cooked, and where on Saturdays they heated huge cauldrons of water for the weekly bath. I asked him about my father paying for his wedding, and he said that wasn't the right story. It was true he had very little money, but he had enough to get married. However, after the service, my father had taken him aside and given him a £50 note, an enormous note in those days, and told him to go to the Rembrandt Hotel up in the West End of London and have a honeymoon. It was very generous, he said. I never forgot it. And it started me and Annie off right enough, just like he said it. We continued talking about things until I realized that my afternoon was disappearing. I still had much of the kitchen. I realized I didn't know what a connection was. I thought she'd tell my husband. Oh, yes, she said. Grandmother. I don't know. No, said one teenager worked in a pub as a barmaid and she had children by the publican. His name was man, my dad. Illegitimate, you understand. That's why we're black. It's not land. Wow. I was. And after telling me how nice it was to talk to me, he rang off and I went back to wrapping things in paper and packing them into boxes. But as you can imagine, the questions started crashing through my head. I mean, it was time to reevaluate my prim, tiny Victorian grandmother, who had not one but two illegitimate children, one of whom ended up living a few streets away from her, and whose boy, her grandson, Ray, used to drop around to help out. Did my father know who this lad was? Surely he must have. Or why would he have been friends with him? And what about the rest of the family? I mean, in those days, it would never have been spoken about openly, so who knew? Everyone on my side of the family is dead, so there's no hope there. That night I sat in front of the fire, exhausting from my lifting and toting. I looked around the bare walls, and it was though, in a way, I was erasing my mother from her own house. And I thought about that, and then it seemed all right. Now it would become our house, me and Jenny. Our pictures, our taste will hang on these walls. It's time for change, and I will hang my mother's picture along with my grandmother's. And I will tell my children this story, and they will forget it. And who knows, in time, they will hang my picture there too.
What's that?
Can you get the bar again? Just gonna shut that out. It's just like an experience. Beautiful. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Oh, I guess it's time for Tom. Welcome, Tom. Welcome back, Tom. Let's wait for your lights to come up. Yeah, oh, there we go.
The first time my father died, I was 20 years old. It was July 3rd, 1976, bicentennial weekend. I had plans to go water skiing with my friends the next day in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, and later to watch the fireworks from the boat. The plans changed when my mother, early in the morning, rushed into my room and said in a breathless voice, "I think Dad's having a heart attack." I was instantly awake. which is saying a lot considering what I'd been doing the night before. One of my friends had made a bong out of a huge conch shell, which he'd packed with ice, making it possible to take deep, cold hits a multitude of times. Later that night in my friend's car, he asked me to watch the right side as we pulled out of the tight parking space. I stuck my head out the window. The car got closer and closer to the car parked next to us until there was a loud humming noise. My friend asked, "What's that?" I said, "It's the cars rubbing together." He said, "I thought you were watching." I said, "I am watching." The next morning, awake but still groggy from the night before, I stepped into my parents' room. I stood there looking at my father's body stretched out on his half of the bed. He was shorter than me and strongly built, a club football player and boxer in his youth, later a lumberyard worker who was proud to have been elevated to the sales office. He'd been a Marine in the Second World War, building supplies after that. Now, at 64, lying face up in summer pajamas, he looked completely gone. His eyes were rusty and dark. His mouth was too, so snoring, up to mid-breath. I told my mother to go downstairs to the living room. I told her to stay there and wait for him. I knew what I had to do. The summer and storm. Love-hate relationship with my father. When I was a toddler, it was all about love. He was the guy who was TV with the family. He'd rub his whiskers on my face to my screen and laughed for him to stop. He'd carry me upstairs to bed, my great protector, lifting me high above my older brothers and sisters who'd complain about all he carried. By the time I was 4 years old, special treatment ended. My father had become the guy that slapped me hard in the face when I misbehaved. It didn't happen often, but often enough to instill terror. This was partly because of the red-faced screaming that came along with it, and because the offenses were so random and slight. I attempted to bite my sister's ankle. Saying to my mother at 10 years old, "What?" instead of, "Yes, Mom?" Bickering as a teenager over the last ice cream left in the carton. On that occasion, he hit my older brother too, and then came up to our room afterwards, sobbing and reaching out to shake our hands. "I don't want to hurt you kids," he said. "You're my own flesh and blood." I shook his hand, but I was past the point of feeling it. By then, he was like a stranger to me. I didn't trust him anymore. I just wanted him to leave the room. When I let my hair grow longer in high school, he took it as some kind of personal offense. "Look at him," he said to a friend, and jerked his thumb in my direction. "He doesn't even look like him." "Oh, Harry," his friend said, as if he could get a break. But it was okay. I'd already decided I didn't want to be anything like him. We'd disown each other. My mother hurried downstairs and climbed up the bed and knelt beside my father. This was before CPR was common practice. It hadn't been shown yet on TV. I'd never even heard the term before. But in college the previous semester, I had taken a swim class, senior life saving, and I had a pretty clear idea of what to do. I felt his neck for a pulse, listened closely to his mouth for the sound of breathing. I stuck my fingers in his mouth and checked for an obstruction. Then I tilted my father's head back, took a deep breath, put my mouth on his, and breathed into him. His chest rose like a big balloon. It was much easier than I thought it would be. I gave him another breath, and then pushed down with the heels of my hands onto his sternum. The air came whooshing out of his mouth. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to happen. I gave him another breath, and then another. Again, I pushed on his chest, and again the air rushed out. Was I doing something wrong? Shouldn't he be coming back to life by now, like a drowning victim coughing up water? With his eyes open, he seemed to be watching from a great distance, and not in an accepting way. He was caught in this world and the next, watching me put my mouth on his, watching me fail in my effort to bring him back. And senseless. I couldn't bear it. To watch like that. So I closed his eyelids with my hand. In the next moment, they drifted. I closed them again and drifted open again. I see both of us now from my distance. This long-haired kid crouching over his father, trying to coax him back to life. The two of us in the same bed, probably the same mattress, riding conceived. The incredible love we feel for the ones who are back to life. I buried my face into my father's neck, prayed to God to bring him back. I prayed to a God I wasn't even sure existed. I prayed out loud, promising God that I would never doubt my belief in him again, if he would please. Just bring my father back. I was taught in a Catholic school by the Sisters of St. Francis, taught to model myself after the Christ child. I liked Jesus, liked everything about him. But as a kid, I wasn't so sure about him being the Son of God. On Sundays, when my family went to church, I would watch my father kneeling in prayer. He'd kneel sometimes, even when everyone else was sitting or standing. He'd cover his face with his hands. And I could see he was a true believer, a deep communion with Jesus, whose picture of the Sacred Heart glowing through his vestments kept on the wall beside his desk in her basement. My mother, on the other hand, was less convincing. Sometimes she would sit when we were supposed to be kneeling. When she folded her hands in prayer, it looked more like one hand fiddling with the other. So she was biding her time. As for me, because we weren't allowed to eat before the service, and because I was a skinny kid who needed breakfast in the morning, I'd often leave the church early to sit in the parking lot with my head between my knees. The nausea usually passed quickly. I figured it was church that made me sick. And I'd spend the rest of the time wandering through the lines of parked cars. I'd sit on the guardrail and daydream, gazing across the valley towards the wooded hills in the distance. I thought it might happen right away. I believed it could happen. So intense was my prayer. But when I raised my face from my father's neck and looked at him again, his eyes were still open, still dark, distant, his mouth still gaping. The prayer hadn't worked. The terms of my bargain not accepted. I continued giving him the breaths of pushing on his chest. I continued close at his eyes, which kept drifting open. A few times I hugged him, and with a deepening sense of despair, begged him to come back. When the ambulance arrived and the technicians rushed into the room, I got off the bed and went downstairs to the living room. My mother had gone outside and was talking to some neighbors. I sat in an armchair, sobbing into my hands like a lost little kid that's now become separated from his dad. Upstairs, they had taken him off the bed, and as they shocked his heart with electricity, I heard the sound of his body hitting the floor. I knew he was gone. And when I heard his body thump the second time, I wondered why they were bothered. A few minutes passed in silence while I waited for them to come down and deliver the news. Then I heard a struggle on the stairs and was shocked to see them carrying a stretcher with my father strapped to it. His eyes were closed. An oxygen mask was taped with an X across his mouth. He looked tired and pale, but alive. The bargain had been accepted. In the hospital, after several days in intensive care, my father was able to sit up in bed. One morning, he told me that the doctor had told him what I'd done. "Did you hold my nose?" my father asked, "when you gave me breaths?" "No," I said, "but I could tell the air went in anyway." That was all we ever said to each other about it. Later, while still in the hospital, he formed the opinion that my mother and I had overreacted. He'd tell his visitors that if we hadn't called the ambulance, he would have awakened on his own. For everyone else, I was the family hero. No one told me that directly, but friends of my brothers and sisters would tell me they'd heard what I'd done. I didn't tell any of them the truth. But it was actually God's doing, which he could just as easily undo if I didn't hold up my end of the bargain. My father lived for 6 more years, pretty much the same guy as before, but a lot more. We became closer. My fear of him having evolved into a general awareness. When he died the second and final time, I felt a great sorrow, but also a great relief. I've been released from the burden of belief. I could return to a more natural condition, familiar and comforted, a welcoming embrace of doubt.
Just so beautiful.
Angela. Everybody's Angela. Fun.
There wasn't a usable will, just an old paper waiting an update that would never come. With handwritten notes scribbled in the margins, now deemed invalid as a legal document. Families are not always aware of the implications of probate, but property is real, and the house is something concrete. Her house and its contents are not the only things my mother left behind, things both valuable and expendable. She passed away after a long and complicated decline that began well before the pandemic. Her struggles with osteoporosis, heart failure, and dementia were exacerbated under the weight of it all, denying access to both her church and neighborhood friends, all increasing her sense of isolation, paranoia, and neediness. Neediness, both real and that of long-standing practice. In the end, my mom spent the last 5 months of her life bedridden, gradually losing herself, finally succumbing to her bad heart. It was July 7th, approximately 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What is it that you're left with when a parent leaves you? There is the curly hair, musicality, curvy body, and elegant bearing that reminds me I was my mother's child. There are the hands, full lips, lack of patience, and triggered temper that reminds me I was daddy's girl. It was years after his death when I finally cried for my father. We had unfinished business. I was 20 and angry at the time. When he died, he left a broken relationship with the daughter unsure of the debt owed and ignorant of the legacy bridging our lives. It took years before I recognized my father deep inside my head and that both a reckoning and forgiveness were necessary. She only just left. Older and no longer angry, I must still process. What am I feeling? Our relationship was not nearly as straightforward. She, being that same-sex parent, brought to our bond a complex mixture of traits and shared talents. Here and now, I'm left with a fusion of admiration and resolved resentments. Memories of long ago competitiveness and bullying. And now, gratitude, pity, even indebtedness. I know she too is here, somewhere inside, yet I can't yet access the loss in any clear way. Partly due to the numbness I still feel from the caregiving and drama leading up to her death, mainly because of the nature of our painfully convoluted and complicated decades-long relationship. I'll start with those early tangible things. She told me that after she was gone, I was to have her mink coat. Though I knew it was important to her, I never wanted the coat, and still don't. It was, at the time of purchase, a symbol of what other more affluent women owned. But my mother, that colored woman up in the South, raising her children in housing projects, bought herself a mink coat on layaway. She wore it proudly to church, where she it off, comparing it to other fur coats paid for out of hard-earned cash over months at a time. She wore the coat with a matching pillbox hat. The coat is stored in a hallway closet, the hat in a large hat box on top of her bedroom shift robe, now covered in dust. Though I had no use for that coat, I now go back and forth, wondering if I should retrieve it from that Brooklyn closet and bring it to Los Angeles to hang in my closet, just because it meant so much to her. During my last few visits from before the pandemic, she began gifting me bits of jewelry. A gold chain and pendant, a silver ring inlaid with mother of pearl, and a set of earrings. Later, I found broken pieces, rhinestones, single clasps, costume jewelry parts I remembered worn when I was a child. The pieces that remained that she gifted me, I now treasure. I wear them, knowing that the necklace hung around her neck, that she wore that silver ring and those earrings throughout my life. She tended to hoard, not like those people you see on cable television. Her home was not crowded with debris from floor to ceiling, but her closets, dresser drawers, and cabinets were overstuffed. I found my old high school textbooks behind trinkets on dusty shelves, and the record albums my sisters and I acquired in the 70s sat in a corner behind a table in her crowded living room. These were things we left behind and she could not let go of. As if she were holding them for us, keeping them safe, awaiting our return. She kept clothing from every decade of her adult life, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, well into the new century. Old bedding used on long gone frontal beds, a tablecloth gifted by a great aunt whose own mother was born a slave, now frayed and stained, saved as if the spirit of the dead resided inside the tattered, discolored lace. Pots and pans furnished by years of use, black-bottomed and bent, kept utensils held ancient recipes. Secret recipes, remembered from a long ago childhood, used in some long abandoned kitchen. A baby grand piano sits in the front room, rarely played. A gift from relatives of another dead family friend, an old hymn mule, and scraps of religious choral scores, hide sheet music of popular songs purchased when I lived in her home during a time when we sometimes sang songs together, songs we both loved. These things are still stacked on top of the instrument. She loved to sing, had a beautiful soprano, and performed in multiple choirs throughout her life. What do I do with the piano? It holds such memory, but its bulk won't fit inside my small apartment on the other side of the country. Her collection of funeral programs. This is the way of the world, death, relatives, friends long past. Some I do not know, but I dare not throw these precious remembrances with me. My mother is gone. Who is that? remember her kin, her neighbors, her friends, those who made up her world, a world separate from the world we shared. In a small china cabinet across the dining table from the large china cabinet, where she kept the dinnerware she hardly ever used, is a collection of proofs and bells, delicately painted, each with its own unique tone. A singer, she loved sound and collected them over years, though I can't tell you where from. Did I gift her a no one Christmas long ago? I don't remember now. What of unfulfilled dreams? My father told me while dying of cancer that if he had to do it over again, he would like to have owned a house on the beach. The Jersey Shore, whispered as I sat by his bed. It was weeks before his death, and he had never confided in me in that way. He loved the shoreline. As do I. And now I can't walk a beach without thinking of him. Perhaps it's enough that we can still take leisurely walks on a long beach together. My mother's dreams were opaque in their expression, other than her regret at marrying my father, a sentiment only revealed as her dementia deepened. She never discussed the things she wished for herself. So, is opaque even the correct word? Did my mother have dreams of her own? Was she allowed to dream as a child? Did she allow herself to dream as an adult? Did she believe she had the right to dream? They were both two of Jim Crow's scarred children. She, abandoned by her teenage black mother and unknown white father, she, in her white skin, was raised by her relatives, bringing into her adulthood a mixture of love for family and confused identity, culminating in degrees of hatred and generosity. All of which she imparted on her children and their children, a complicated and confusing prejudice. There was his tendency towards illness and addiction. My 44-year-old father died never having managed to overcome his alcoholism or his anger. I like my, but it saved me his ability to shed his despair, this peaceful inheritance. There was her resistance to joy. She only traveled. We didn't take real vacations. Fun was never part of the agenda. Only a sense of obligation colored the things we did as family. Did we have unfinished business? As she lay dying, I was comforted in the knowledge that we had come to a mutual understanding and deep love for one another. I recall thinking night after night, it's okay. You can go when you're ready. When she finally could no longer recall my name, that too was okay. Is her psychic journey incomplete? I don't know. Is it my responsibility to complete it? No, I don't believe so. So what do I owe the dead? I'm not sure. I am only now asking myself this question. Perhaps simply to continue, perhaps simply a continued thirst for life and the desire to move on. How do I honor or pay homage to live that life as fully as I can? Of what is left behind, what am I responsible for? A house I don't want, a piano I can't use, anything? What can I claim as my inheritance? gift that is my life. The knowledge that I was wanted and loved. Gratitude. And what can I discard? All the pain. When a relationship is complicated, is it okay to feel relief? I believe so. They say that grief comes in waves. What if my sea lacks storm clouds? What if the water is currently nothing but calm?
Beautiful.
Yeah, she was pretty stunning.
Thanks, everybody. That was awesome. Just such strong stories, and thank you all for trusting me to help you bring to out in the world. So next Saturday is our Veterans Day event. Will is working with me to produce that as well, and it's going to be really, really good. I think. And then December 3rd, I think it is. Is that right? So the first Sunday in December will be the next true story, and our theme is a mixed bag. That's right. It's a mixed bag. And that's all we have. Please donate if you can. Please eat all that pumpkin bread out there, please. Anything else? Anybody want to say anything? Just bravo.
You
You
guys-
guys. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Heather. That's it.